Hello everyone, this is El Spectral. Welcome back to the Land of Empires. And today I'm going to bring everyone a highly requested video covering the most popular hero as well as troop formation compositions that is used by players across each season. Now, one thing that is not going to be included in this video are Season 1 and 2. And this is a result of the 6 new legendary heroes that were released about 3-4 months ago. And those 6 heroes kind of bring additional layer of complexity to the early game, in particular Season 1 and 2. Power level wise, on average, those heroes are comparable to Season 2 heroes and maybe even to some degree Season 3. Therefore, players should also keep in mind that the Season 3 composition, the best Season 3 composition, may be quite different from what I will cover in this video. However, moving on from Season 3 into Season 4 through 7, those heroes become stronger and stronger to the point of completely overwhelming the 6 new heroes that were added recently. And therefore, players can expect fairly consistent compositions in Season 4 through Season 7. So across each season, I will review 2 components. The first components are the most standard compositions that people run. And then I will review alternate variations to the troop formation, as well as variations in the armament setups. Due to the awakening skills that some heroes have, which can be very strong, armaments also bring an additional layer of complexity where people can bring the awakening skills of early season heroes into the later seasons. And that makes later season hero compositions much more powerful than if they had not used the armament. So let's get started, starting with Season 3. As everyone knows, the 3 Season 3 heroes are Horus, Hannibal, and Hanzo. And the most common Season 3 composition, as with Season 4 and 5, is kind of a 4-1-2 setup. So here, I will always kind of balance the troop count to 100,000. So if you have higher march capacities, you can just multiply by that factor and you will get the unit composition that you need. So for Season 3, the ideal standard composition is mostly infantry, some archer, and some cavalry. And the reason for that is that the cavalry really does not do too much damage. The cavalry, its main job is to target the infantry. However, the infantry is generally very tanky and also able to hit the cavalry. So the infantry does a lot of damage to the cavalry. So having a lot of cavalry just results in them dying fairly quickly. And therefore, typically in Season 3, you will not be running too many cavalry. Now, armament-wise, I'm sure that there are different possibilities that you can bring into Season 3 by using the armaments from the 6 new legendary heroes, as well as potentially armaments from Season 2. But actually, when we played back in Season 3, armaments did not exist. So I am actually not too familiar with armaments in Season 3. But this is generally the Season 3 setup. A possible variation is to have less cavalry, for example, just 1 cavalry, and having that amount of troops into the archer. And this is because Hanzo is a very powerful archer hero. You just have 1 cavalry. The cavalry dies, you suffer no losses. I mean, you just don't lose much from not having the cavalry. But you do need 1 cavalry troops. And I just want to explain the reason why that is the case. And that is because passive skills are retained when the unit dies. Meaning that if your cavalry, for example, has a damage down passive or a rage skill boost passive, this passive will be retained even after your cavalry dies. And that is a very important point to understand. So this is a possible variation, but generally I would never run more archers than infantry in Season 3. So moving on to Season 4, the most popular composition is once again the Kellerman, Morgan, and actually not Charlotte. Charlotte turned out to be a very weak season 4 hero. And this is because her awakening skill, although it does apply kind of a debuff, it doesn't really deal much damage. And therefore, Hanzo is kind of known. He has a reputation as being the infantry killer. So he is very good at dealing heavy damage to the infantry, whether that is season 3 Horus or season 4 Kellerman. He is just very good overall. So the overall unit composition is very similar to season 3, and there is not much utility actually when it comes to armaments, because this team alone is very powerful, and you do not really want to replace the valuable skills that each of these heroes bring to the battlefield. For example, Kellerman, he brings a lot of disarm and a lot of self buffs. Morgan, he brings the rage skill charge boost, and this is actually the first season that features higher like rage skill charge speed for the entire team. And Hanzo, of course, he's just there to kill the infantry. So a variation is once again 1 cavalry and more archers. And this variation is really only used in a 1v1 setup. So if you want to maximize your wins against a single opponent or a single march, then this is a popular composition of choice. However, for example, in a 3v3 setup, you do not want to lose your cavalry, because losing your cavalry means that in the next battle, your Kellerman and your Hanzo will recharge at a much slower rate than what they would have with the Morgan skill 3 support. So if you're facing against multiple teams, for example, in the Arena of Legends, you may even want to use a higher quantity of cavalry if you know that your army will survive against one team. So for example, if you really want your cavalry to survive, you can use a higher quantity of cavalry. But in general, you would want more infantry than archer and more archer than cavalry. So that is season 4. And you can see season 3 and season 4, the compositions are fairly similar, and that is a consistent story across until season 6, basically. So moving on to season 5, once again we see this reappearing hero, that being Hanzo. Now, season 5 heroes include Michael as the infantry, Quinn as the cavalry, and Lisbeth as the archer. And although Lisbeth is a significant improvement over Charlotte, she is still weaker than Hanzo. Her rage skill damage is respectable, which is this. You can see it deals 800% damage, and she has fairly quick recharge rate. However, Lisbeth suffers from a couple issues. First issue is that although her skill 3 increases rage skill charge speed by 100%, it actually doesn't do much, because the maximum rage skill charge speed of season 5 heroes is 50%. And Quinn already gives the team 40%. So what this skill is essentially doing, it is reducing Lisbeth's rage skill damage by 30% in exchange for only a 10% extra boost in the charge speed. So this really I wouldn't say cripples her, but it makes her much less good than she would otherwise be. And secondly, her rage skill damage is also not that high compared to Hanzo. And although this defense, the 80% stacks, by season 5, a lot of players would have quite a lot of stats, defenses ranging well into the 1000%. So reducing the defense by like 80% or to 40%, it really doesn't do all that much, or as much as you would like. As opposed to Hanzo, who deals 2400% damage each time he uses his rage skill, it is much superior in terms of straight up firepower compared to Lisbeth. And so a popular non-armament composition in season 5 is Michael, Quinn, and Hanzo. Now, variations of this composition, once again, very similar to season 4 and 3. You can run 1 Quinn, more Hanzo, or if you want to make sure that the cavalry survives, you can run more Quinn, but always keeping the same general rule: more infantry compared to archers and more archers compared to cavalry. Now, finally, this is actually the first season where armaments kind of come into play on your primary team. So a popular variation is to use the Hanzo armament on Lisbeth. And this means that Lisbeth will be able to use Hanzo's skill while carrying over her awakening skill. And her awakening skill is actually very, very useful if we take a look at it here. It reduces the enemy troop's final attack by 10% and reduces the troop ferocity by 5%. And this can sometimes be preferred over Hanzo's awakening skill, which is actually quite good as well. And it increases their damage dealt by 15% a short bit after the beginning of the battle. And overall, I would say that Lisbeth's skill and Hanzo's skill are fairly comparable. However, Lisbeth, keep in mind, she has much more stats than Hanzo. About 115% attack and defense higher than Hanzo. So if players have awakened Hanzo but not awakened Lisbeth, I would recommend they just stick with Hanzo plus they just stick with Hanzo. If they do have both awakened Lisbeth and awakened Hanzo, then I would definitely run awakened Lisbeth with Hanzo armor over awakened Hanzo. And that is quite a bit superior compared to awakened Hanzo. So that covers kind of what is known as the standard seasons in the Land of Empires. Now, going into season 6, the meta of the combat drastically changes. No longer will we have infantry being superior to the archer, which is superior to the cavalry. Instead, we come into a meta that is heavily infantry focused and very little archer focused. So the season 6 heroes are known as Frost. I'm just going to call him Chitaurian because I cannot really pronounce his name. And then Horn God. And there are actually quite a bit of armor variations in this composition. But diving first of all into the unit composition, typically people would run heavy infantry, some cavalry, and one archer. There are very few situations where you want to run more than one archer, unless you are going against a team that is not season 6. So the only situation where you would want to run more than one archer, typically 10,000 is more than sufficient, is when you are going, say, for example, against a full season 5 team or a lower season team. And that is because the season 6 archer, he has a lot of self-protection against other seasons. However, he does not have any self-protection pretty much against season 6. So the season 6 infantry will absolutely destroy the season 6 archer. No matter how many season 6 archers you have, it will get destroyed. And the season 6 cavalry is also an expert at destroying the season 6 archer. So if you just want to win a 1v1 fight, what happens is that if your cavalry is strong, you can run a 1-to-1 infantry to cavalry ratio. So something like this. If your cavalry is weak, on the other hand, or if you just want to win a defense, a popular composition is to run a majority infantry, meaning pretty much all infantry and one cavalry and one archer. And this kind of brings us back to the point or the game mechanic that says that the passive skills are retained after the troop type dies. So when the archer dies, for example, the 2 passives that the archer has are retained across the entire battle or across the first minute and a half of the battle. And that is more advanced battle mechanics that I won't cover in this video, but basically to just give a quick mention, after about a minute and a half, for some reason, all debuff across both sides gets wiped. And this is actually one of the primary contributors to timeouts that are common within season 6. So going back to the compositions, this is a popular, probably the most popular defense composition. Just throw everything to infantry and then run one cavalry and one archer. Right, so now we talk about armors. And season 6 awakening skills are just very bad. Not only are the buffs rather weak, but it also has a counter. It also kind of works against itself. So the damage dealt is reduced by 10%, and this is really bad. This is like not having an awakening skill at all. So one popular setup in Season 6 are the armor variations. So people tend to run Kellerman, Quinn, and Lisbeth with Season 6 armor. A variation to Lisbeth is Hanzo, but once again, by this point, a lot of people may have awakened Lisbeth, so Lisbeth is preferred over Hanzo. And under this composition, the troop formations are still similar. You can either run 100% Kellerman, or you can run heavy infantry, some cavalry, and one archer. Or if you are against a weaker seasoned team, you can run 5,000 or 10,000 archers, just so that the archer does not die and is ready to go against the next team. Now, one other variation that I should mention is that if you are against Season 6, for example, and you are able to kill their infantry and cavalry. You are able to kill the cavalry and archer. However, the infantry is still alive. And this is a very common scenario in Season 6 because the infantry is just so hard to kill. So it is up to the next team to kill that infantry. But what happens when your Season 6 team is going against solo Season 6 infantry? In this situation, you need to keep your archers alive. But the Season 6 hero, even without the archer support, is very good at killing the archers. So to keep the archer alive, one thing that players may run is a decent number of infantry and a lot of archers. So something like this. Or even fewer infantry and more archers. And this is really just to keep the archer alive so that the archer can boost the infantry for the next battle. And this composition is really only used in the Arena of Legends or Apex Arena. It is never really a possibility in a 1v1 setup. You never really want to use more than one archer. Like, there's absolutely no scenario outside of the Battle of Disorder, which has a completely different mechanic, by the way. You never want to use more than one archer in a 1v1 setup, ever. Right, so going back to the armor, the reason why this is a popular armor setup for Season 6 is because Kellerman brings disarm, Quinn brings 30% damage down from normal attack skills for the entire team, and Lisbeth debuffs the enemy team. So these three heroes, they bring excellent awakening skills to Season 6, and therefore they represent the armament setup and also the optimal team for Season 6. Now, finally, moving on to Season 7, which is also the most complicated season we've had thus far. We have Neptunarch as the infantry, Dorothy as the cavalry, and finally, whoever this is, as the archer. And the archer turns out to be currently completely useless in Season 7. It is decent with respect to maybe Season 5 or even Season 6. But in Season 7, it is just completely useless. So there are two primary compositions that people run in Season 7. The first composition is Neptunarch, Dorothy, and Horn God. Keep in mind, this does not include armor just yet. So Season 7, Season 7, Season 6. And the composition to run with this is heavy infantry, but also a decent amount of cavalry as well as archer. And the reason why you would want to run a decent amount of cavalry and archer is that they are actually fairly well defended against anything that is not one of the best two Season 7 teams. So against everything that is not one of the best two Season 7 teams, these cavalry and archer are able to keep themselves alive and deal a lot of damage. However, versus a similar team, a similar Season 7 team, I guess I should mention the other team, and that is Frost. That is Season 6, Season 7, Season 6. And in this team, the composition is a little different. So let me just think about the composition here. So the composition, the one of the key elements of Season 7 is that you need the cavalry to use their ultimate. If the cavalry dies before using their ultimate, then it's like the cavalry was not there in the first place. So you need to run sufficient cavalry so that it can, it can use their ultimate. So fewer archers, probably 5,000 is enough, or maybe even 1. Season 7 is new enough that we haven't not really tested these scenarios just yet. But 5,000, so very low archer count is usually safe. Enough cavalry to survive, and everything else into infantry. So in this case, 75,000. And what the cavalry does in this composition is that it makes the infantry super, super tanky. It will also give the infantry a bit more damage potential that they will be able to deal to the enemy. But versus a mirror setup, versus an equally tanky infantry, you won't be doing much damage. So all will happen is that you will get timed out. Now, one thing you do not want to happen is for your enemy to use, like in a 3v3 setup, for example, you do not want your enemy to use like a dummy team to kill your cavalry. So one variation to this composition is higher cavalry. For example, you can use 40,000 cavalry. And what this does is that it kind of guarantees against a slightly weaker opponent that their dummy team, for example, season 6, season 6, season 3, or season 6, season 6, season 6, will not be able to kill your cavalry, and this team will be able to move on to quote-unquote time out a second team. And that is really important in the season 6 meta. Season 7 meta. Because this team can time out anything. Versus an equally strong opponent, there is no team that can beat this team in a 1v1. And there's also no team that can beat this team in a 1v1. And that is kind of where Season 7 is kind of more of a rock, paper, scissors game in a 3v3 lineup than Season 6. Season 6, you have obvious defensive setups, but Season 7, you have this kind of defense that's very easy to be crushed by, for example, me just running a dummy team against it, or trying to run a dummy team against it, and get obliterated pretty much. And by obliterated, I mean killing the archer and the infantry, and the cavalry. If the infantry is the only hero that is alive, then he will get wiped out by the next team. I don't know how. I don't know what the cavalry does that makes the infantry so strong or so immortal, because nothing in the skill description really tells us why that is the case. But anyways, I digress. So the popular compositions for this setup is a decent amount of cavalry and archer and some infantry. Now armor variations to this setup. Obviously, we do not have Season 7 armor yet. Once we get Season 7 armor, the popular setups will probably be Kellerman, Lisbeth, and Dorothy. And the reason why we run Dorothy over Quinn is because Dorothy actually has the same awakening skill as Quinn, but slightly better. She gives 40% melee resistance instead of Quinn's 30% melee resistance. But for now, the best team is Neptunarch. And the variation here is Lisbeth because she confers further damage reduction to the enemy team. And this is only respect to a 1v1 setup. In a 3v3 setup, you don't really want to use Lisbeth because you may not want to use Lisbeth. You would want to use Lisbeth only in the scenario where you want to keep the infantry and archer alive. If you are running this team against a mirror team or the Season 6, Season 7, Season 6 team, then your archer and cavalry will die no matter what because the infantry is just immortal. You will get timed out. If you're on the defensive side, then the battle will last so long that your enemy's infantry will still be able to kill the cavalry and archer. So no matter how much damage down you bring into the battlefield, they will still die. Even if you run more, they will still die because the battle just lasts so long and you cannot keep them alive unless you are so much stronger than your opponent. But in that case, you'll probably just kill their team. I'm thinking whether I missed anything. I don't think there's anything I really missed. So everyone knows there are counters, but I don't really think this does anything. The stats that they bring are very meager. By season 7, players have well over 1000% across all their stats. So 25% is very much negligible. And yeah, I think this covers everything across the different seasons. Leona, she is really not used in season 7 across all 3 teams actually. Sometimes she is used as a backup archer, but even as a backup archer, she is just there to fill the ranks by having, say, a very low troop count. I have really never seen people use a high troop count for Leona. Now, one thing that the developers did for her recently was to buff her skills 3 and give her an additional 60% damage taken reduction from enemy rage skills. But the problem with this skill is that rage skills really don't do that much damage in Season 7. The bulk of Season 7 damage comes from the passive skills that trigger whenever a rage skill is used. So you can see in this skill, each time your units release a skill, deal 900% damage to all enemy units. Now the skill that Leona has cannot defend against this skill because it is trying to defend against the rage skill, which deals a meager 200% damage, and it probably doesn't even hit the archer. So this skill does not affect the archer, so she is defending against nothing, essentially. And if we look at the cavalry skill from season 7, the cavalry also does not hit the archer, I think. Yeah, the cavalry rage skill, it only targets the infantry, it only targets the cavalry. It does not deal damage to the archer. So her rage skill, her passive skill, the archer's passive skill is essentially, it really does not protect her from anything. So if you use Leona, she just ends up dying. Although one benefit from her is that her her awakening skill is alright. Her awakening skill allows her to take 25% less damage from the cavalry. However, compared to Lisbeth, which confirms this overall damage down to both final attack and final ferocity, her awakening skill is at best slightly better than Lisbeth. So considering she cost, 1450 fragments, I think, to awaken. Yeah, she's just not a very good option for Season 7. So I hope everyone enjoyed my commentary on the different season heroes and the popular setups, as well as troop compositions, as well as armor variations. Once I get a better understanding of the 6 new Season 1 heroes, I call them Season 1, but they're not really Season 1. They're just released in Season 1, but they actually have like the power of Season 2 to Season 3. Once I get a better understanding of what they actually do, I might go back and review popular compositions across Season 1 through 3. But for now, I'll end this video here. So hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see everyone in my next video.